Hello, dear friends. It's very difficult to tell the truth without offending anyone because there are very sensitive skins. But that is the challenge we journalists face. I was fortunate to live in a time when freedom of expression was encouraged. But now there are threats of fear and silence everywhere. Opinion piece. Signs of tyranny. From the great restart to the great rejection. This week could be a beginning. Hardly anyone dares to speak their mind. We go through times of fear of the truth. Silence of the lambs is not innocent. It is increasingly difficult to disseminate information. Fear cannot stop freedom of thought. Only polite and diplomatic dissent is acceptable. The tyranny of the single thought is the most sibylline one. Freedom of speech was encouraged in the 1960s. Today's generation is creating a miserable world. Banks are on the verge of a collapse worse than in 2008. The media has turned to propaganda. People have lost faith in the state, and the state has lost faith in its people. The welfare of mankind is always the alibi of tyrants. Albert Camus. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Voltaire. Let's start. If anything characterizes our times, it is that many tyrant-like individuals are appearing disguised as great democrats who are obsessed with curtailing our freedom and constitutional rights under various excuses, supposedly for our good. The fear of freedom, of which the famous psychoanalyst Erich Fromm spoke of in his day, is becoming a reality. We forget that the welfare of mankind is always the alibi of tyrants, according to Albert Camus. Tyranny is defined as the abuse or imposition to an extraordinary degree of any power, force, or superiority. For the modern mentality, tyranny is identified with an abusive and cruel use of the political power that has been usurped, a power not only illegitimate by its origin, but also unjust by its exercise, and which represses any opposition. But the worst of all is the absolutism of the single thought directed by the matrix controllers, because it is internalized so that every citizen becomes his brother's keeper. Single thought. Every totalitarian system is based on the tyranny of a single thought. It has nothing to do with a particular ideology, but with the limitation of ideology to a single type of thinking. The lack of freedom to think freely is what characterizes every authoritarian system, be it right wing or left wing, and it is this forced obedience to think in a certain or politically correct way that exposes the whole system. To think contrary to Stalin's dictates was a death sentence in the ancient Soviet Union, and the same happens today in some Muslim countries, and without going much further, in Venezuela, Cuba, and North Korea. I remember that the former dictator of North Korea shot dead in public the conductor of an orchestra because he didn't like his music. In the West, the inquisitors are more sophisticated because they do not kill you, but they ridicule and discredit you, except in the case of a Spanish expediente Royuela file. We are going through times of great fear of the truth and almost nobody dares to say what they really think for fear of being accused, stigmatized, persecuted or threatened. Although the dictatorship of the single thought believes that fear is enough to stop freedom of thought, history has always shown us the opposite. Social contract. The social contract is history, because now it is fashionable to impose by force. At least in Switzerland they hold referendums from time to time to know the will of the people, but in the rest of the world the law of common order reigns, just because the social contract is an agreement made within a group by its members, as for example that which is acquired in a state in relation to its rights and duties and those of its citizens. It is based on the idea that all the members of the group agree on their own free will with the social contract by virtue of which they admit the existence of an authority, moral norms, and laws to which they submit. The social pact is an explanatory hypothesis of political authority and social order. Now the Davos Forum is talking us about a new social contract without us having signed anything or being asked our opinion. Since the fall of mankind, there have been thugs seeking power to demand that their gods be worshipped, or to be worshipped as gods themselves. This has been true from the earliest tribes of Africa, through the pharaohs of Egypt, to the dynasties of Asia and the Caesars of Rome. It is not different now. The new faith, like the old religion, simply boils down to the worship of a man they call a leader. A miserable world. The new generation is creating a miserable world. The Who legend singer Roger Daltrey says that the new generation is creating a miserable world that serves to stifle the kind of creative freedom he enjoyed in the 60s. The iconic frontman made the comments during a recent appearance on Zane Lowest Apple Music One podcast. And quotes, "I don't know, we might get somewhere because it's getting so upset now with artificial intelligence, with all the tricks it can do, and with the new conformist generation." Daltrey said, "It is terrifying the miserable world they are going to create for themselves. I mean, anybody who's lived a life and sees what they are doing, you just now, it is a road to now we hear. To nowhere, I mean," he added. The singer highlighted how he was fortunate to have lived throughout the time when freedom of speech was encouraged, not silenced. In quotes, especially when you lived throughout the periods of life that we have been privileged to live. I mean, we have had the golden era. There is no question about that, he said. Daltrey also criticized the negative impact social media has had on the world, saying it has undermined the truth. It is getting harder and harder to spread the truth. It is almost like we should turn everything off now. Go back to newsprint, go back to word of mouth, and start reading books again, he said. Loss of confidence. People have lost faith in the state, and the state have lost faith in its people. That's how states and empires decline, according to Charles Hugh Smith via the Of Two Minds blog. The state tolerates polite advocacy because it is easily dismissed, but sees dissent as a threat and responds accordingly. State elected officials and non-elected officials see citizen advocacy as a nuisance, but dissent is understood as a direct challenge to the state's monopoly of force and its concentration of wealth throughout taxation, and the challenge to the state's freedom to exercise its powers as it pleases. When people realize that advocacy is an empty promise of political leverage and move toward dissent, the repressive powers of the state are unleashed. This includes the judiciary, law effortless suppress free speech by shadow banning dissenters, all under the convenient guise of banning disinformation. When the state sees dissent as an existential threat to its monopoly powers, it has lost faith in its own citizenry, fearful that citizens will not approve of political deals and imperial machinations at the global level. It boasts enormous resources to concealing its actions, policies, and intentions because power is based on secrecy. This is how states and empires decay and sink in history. When the citizenry loses faith in the state and the state loses faith in its citizenry, then everything becomes theater and artifice, the pantomime of elections, the carefully selected simulacra of freedom of speech as long as you think the same as the boss, the avalanche of absurd promises that can never be fulfilled, the tiresome parade of politically expedient arrangements, a central bank dedicated to expanding the wealth and income inequality that all are already staggering. On the brink of collapse, banks are currently on the verge of collapse, worse than in 2008, according to the Atlantis report. The US economy grew over 6%, with the government giving away thousands of dollars per person. What will happen when they finish printing money? Is there a big crash coming after the ultra mega bubble we are in? The market speaks loud and clear. Sure, earnings are good right now, but is this as good as it looks? It all seems to go downhill from here. If the Fed inflates assets 100% by devaluing the dollar, wealth is not generated. Purchasing power or asset value has not changed. Capital gain taxes should be reduced by inflation. All that money they print literally has no effect on helping the economy because 99% of the stimulus bill funds end up in the hands of the wealthiest 1% and get packed. Inflation is about to skyrocket. Prices rise. Commodities plummet at a record pace as iron ore and copper explode higher overnight. Transitory or not, Goldman Global Head of Commodities Research Jeffrey Curry said, "We are in a new world, and nowhere is that more evident that in the unprecedented rise in commodity prices around the world, from US and Canadian lumber to Chilean copper and Chinese iron ore. Prices are soaring with the spot commodity index up a staggering 62% year on year, the fastest pace since January 1980. The latest surge came from China overnight, where benchmark iron ore futures jumped 10% to an all-time high. Steel prices rose 6%, and copper prices touched record highs on hopes of improved demand amid tighter supply. Increased scrutiny of cryptocurrencies. In a move designed to gain at least more measure of control over Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, the Treasury Department is proposing a federal regulation that would require banks and other money services firms to file reports with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network if they engage in a cryptocurrency transaction above $3,000. This regulation includes not only traditional banks and credit unions, but also casinos, brokerage, mortgage companies, and insurance companies, among other businesses. UK announces voter ID law to prevent cheating. In an effort to prevent and deter cheating, photo ID will now be required to vote in UK general elections. A proposal included in the Queen's speech to Parliament on Tuesday, today. Reset news. The news I had yesterday is that this week could be the start of a lot of things. Expect more cyber attacks from the bad guys as the good guys continue to dismantle the financial system that the dark side of the force has used for a century. One event in DC could be a false flag related to power grids, but it would end quickly. The banks are out of money. The Federal Reserve is almost gone. The bad guys are panicking and fighting back in many ways. Expect cyber attacks over the next couple of months, along with supply chain interference. Don't panic. The coalition is in control. With the old systems gone, Starlink would control many new systems around the world. We would have a new internet, free energy, medical beds, and transparent instant voting systems in the 209 nations participating in the global currency reset. I think the countdown has begun. It is getting exciting now, as many signs are appearing that it is almost time to pass. May is said to be the month, and there are only 20 days left. We don't like to focus on dates because we have been disappointed many times. At the time of the event, all your systems go quantum, and our start will not benefit the bad guys. Can you imagine an internet more than 7 times faster than our current dinosaur? Unlimited free power in the ethers. Key information is distributed across multiple social media platforms. I've seen accounts deleted and returned. Some changed their name or moved to other platforms. And new video platforms continue to pop up. It is a jungle out there, and it can be difficult to navigate. It is almost impossible to keep up now, as there is so much going on, but we still manage to laugh. During the event, we will hear that the armies of the world would be deploying during 10 days for mass arrests. Some areas could see martial law, as those arrests would be necessary in Europe to clean up their countries. While that is going on, there could be curfews to keep people at home for their own safety. Short news. NATO allies invade Black Sea for military exercises. The War Games will be held through May 14 in 5 Black Sea and Balkan nations: Bulgaria, Georgia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Romania. US Special Forces are involved, and all branches of the armed forces, including the Green Berets. The 5 host nations: Britain, Germany, Spain, and Ukraine. With the exception of Turkey, all Black Sea littoral states are participating except Russia. Space Force Chief Scientist says development of augmented super soldiers a must. The Space Force's top scientist said last week that human augmentation should be embraced, and that it is imperative for the US military to begin work on such technology, which could create a type of super soldier as we have seen in many movies. Robots may replace a quarter of combat soldiers. By the middle of this century, US Army soldiers may be fighting alongside roboted squad mates. General Robert Camus revealed the news at an Army Aviation Symposium last week, noting that the military is considering reducing the size of a brigade combat team from 4,000 soldiers to 3,000, with robots and drones to make up for the lost firepower. Dream Chaser's space plane cleared for resupply to space station. The Dream Chaser space plane entered into a usage agreement for resupply missions to the International Space Station in 2022. The unnamed robotic space plane will be catapulted into low Earth orbit via Launch Alliance Vulcan Center rockets from Florida Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The first resupply mission is scheduled for the first half of 2022. The mystery of dark energy. HeadTex, a project of Penn State University scientists, aims to create a three-dimensional map of 2.5 million galaxies that would yield valuable information about the Byzantine puzzle of why the expansion of the universe is accelerating over time, a property attributed to so-called dark energy. Middle East. Hamas fired 250 rockets at Israel. Southern Israel was bombarded by more than 250 rockets from the Gaza Strip on Monday afternoon and Tuesday, as their guerrilla groups launched rocket barrages, injuring at least 31 Israeli civilians. In retaliation for the rocket fire, which according to the groups in the Strip came as part of an operation dubbed Sweat of Jerusalem, the Israel Defense Forces carried out waves of airstrikes against 130 targets in the Strip in an operation they call Guardians of the Wall. Israel bombs 150 Gaza targets in retaliation for Hamas rockets. The Israeli army has carried out dozens of deadly strikes in Gaza after Hamas launched a barrage of rockets, accusing Israeli authorities of violently cracking down on Palestinian worshippers on an important night of Ramadan. China. Mainland China's population grows to 1.41 billion in 2020. Mainland China's population reached this figure in 2020, which registered an annual increase of 0.83%. China's National Bureau of Statistics announced in a statement Tuesday, citing data from its 7th national population census. China imposes new boundary with Nepal at Everest summit to keep climbers away. In the latest sign that Beijing is casually watching the outbreak in India as it spreads across its border into neighboring Nepal, China has set up a separation line at the summit of Mount Everest to prevent climbers from the Nepal side from mingling with climbers from the Tibet side. China seeks military base on Africa's Atlantic coast. While the US claims that China is the main threat to the so-called rules-based international order, one of the things Beijing lacks is a global military presence like the one Washington has. In fact, China has only one overseas military base on the east coast of Africa in Djibouti. General Stephen Townsend, head of Africa Command, warns that Beijing is looking to expand its military presence in Africa and wants to host a military base on the west coast. Ascension. What is holding you back from ascension? This is the question being asked by Arthurian Council 9D. Truly, the biggest problem you have on earth right now is that you hold grudges, that you feel separate from others, and that you have a hatred in your heart. Letting go of all of that will not only bring you together as a collective, but it will also help you to rise up and want to rise up. You want to exist in a higher frequency state, one that we commonly refer to as the fifth dimension. But you can't get there by seeing yourself as separate from others. Creating division puts you in a three-dimensional mindset and keeps you stuck in a 3D paradigm. You, for the most part, were born into a 3D paradigm, and that is what you have to transcend. You cannot ascend as long as there is a little bit of rancor and selfishness left. Don't see it as letting others off the hook for their bad behavior. See it as the only way to become more of who you really are, which is your higher self, your fifth dimensional self. Stop waiting for something to happen outside of you to catapult you. And only the other chosen one into the fifth dimension. You are going to do this as a collective and to truly experience yourself as source. Energy, you must have the others present, for they are part of source energy and therefore a part of you. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.